My name is Simone Carter. I'm 38 years old. I'm a forensic accountant. And on a Thursday morning in late February, I sat across a courtroom table from the man I had loved for 13 years, and I watched him smile. He was so confident, so sure of himself. He had a folder in his hands thick as a Bible, and he genuinely believed that what was inside it was going to end me, take my children, take my home, take everything I had built with my own two hands while he was busy dismantling it behind my back. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:04 a.m. I gave it 6 minutes. Not because I got lucky, not because someone swooped in to save me, but because for 6 months, while Marcus Carter smiled at me across our kitchen table and thought I had no idea I was building something he never saw coming. 6 months of silence, not because I was weak, because I was loading. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who's with me right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because trust me, you are going to want to hear every single second of this. But to understand what happened in that courtroom, you need to go back with me. Back to a Sunday morning in April 14 months before, when the first crack appeared. And like all cracks, it started so small, I almost missed it. Let me tell you what my life looked like before everything fell apart, because I think that matters. I think you need to see what I had, what I built, what I loved, what I believed in, before you can understand what it meant to watch someone try to take it all away. I grew up in Southwest Atlanta off Cascade Road, the youngest of 3 girls. My mother was a school principal. My father drove for the city transit for 31 years. They were not wealthy people, but they were serious people, serious about education, serious about integrity, serious about doing things right. That upbringing gave me 2 things that would later save my life: a mind that notices patterns and a stomach for patience. I got my accounting degree from Spelman, then my master's from Georgia State. I passed my CPA exam on the first try. By 32, I had carved out a specialty in forensic accounting, which for those who don't know, means I investigate financial fraud. I find the money people try to hide. I trace the transfers, the shell companies, the false invoices, the digital footprints that people leave behind when they think nobody's looking. Companies hire me when they suspect someone is stealing from them. Law firms hire me when divorces get ugly and one spouse starts moving money. I had built a reputation in Atlanta's legal and financial community that took me a decade of 70-hour weeks to earn. By the time this story begins, I was a senior forensic analyst at Meridian Financial Consulting on Peachtree Street, 11 years into my career, and I had just been told quietly by my director that I was being considered for a promotion to Director of Investigations, a title that would come with a $43,000 salary increase and a package of stock options that vested over 4 years. I hadn't told Marcus yet. I was waiting for it to be official. I wanted to celebrate properly. Looking back now, I wish I had never mentioned it at all. Our home was a 2,800 square foot house on Wyndham Court in Buckhead. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard with a magnolia tree that bloomed every spring, a kitchen I had renovated myself by saving for 2 years. We'd been in that house for 6 years. I loved that house the way you love something you actually worked for. We had 2 children. Amara, 7 years old, sharp as a tack, loved math and hated losing at board games. She got both of those from me. And Nolan, 5, soft-spoken, obsessed with dinosaurs, the kind of child who would stop in the middle of the sidewalk to move a worm off the concrete so nobody would step on it. Those 2 children were the absolute center of my universe. Everything I did every long night at the office, every Saturday morning, catching up on case files, it was for them. To give them the kind of foundation my parents gave me. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Darnell Carter, 41 years old, 6 feet, even broad shoulders, a smile that had made me forget my own name once upon a time. He had started his general contracting business, Carter and Associates Construction, from nothing 12 years ago. Just him, a pickup truck, and a business license. By the time we met, he had 6 employees and a solid reputation for residential renovations across Buckhead and Sandy Springs. I had admired that about him fiercely. I still do, in a way, the early version of it, the hunger of it. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party. He spent 45 minutes explaining to me why the host's kitchen renovation had been done wrong. The wrong tile, the wrong grout, spacing, the wrong cabinet hardware. And I spent those 45 minutes thinking this man pays attention. I liked that. I thought we were the same that way. We dated for 2 years. We got married in Savannah outdoor ceremony October, the light coming through the Spanish moss like something out of a painting.
Simone, you are the steadiest thing that has ever happened to my brother. Don't ever let him forget that.
I laughed.
Marcus laughed.
We all laughed. I should have written that down, filed it somewhere, because Terrence saw something the rest of us were too happy to notice. For the first 7 years, our marriage was good. Not perfect, no marriage is perfect, but genuinely good. We had rhythms I loved. Sunday mornings, Marcus would make his mother's biscuit recipe, and we'd sit on the back porch with coffee while the kids watched cartoons inside. Friday nights were date nights when we could manage it, usually just Pascal's or South City Kitchen. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. He coached Nolan's t-ball team on Saturday mornings. I helped Amara with her homework every night before bed. We were a family, a real one. But somewhere around 14 months ago, I can pinpoint it now, though I couldn't then, something shifted. It started small, the way things that matter always start. Marcus began keeping his phone face down on surfaces, always. Kitchen counter, nightstand, the arm of the couch. He'd done it once or twice before, and it hadn't registered. But then it became every time, every surface, every room. I noticed it the way I notice everything quietly without reacting, just filing it away. Then came a Sunday in April. The kids were at my mother's for the weekend. Marcus and I had the house to ourselves, which should have felt like a gift. We were on the back porch, the magnolia just starting to bloom, coffee going cold in our mugs, because we'd gotten distracted talking, and his phone buzzed on the table between us. He reached for it faster than I had ever seen him reach for anything. Flipped it over, glanced at the screen, then set it back down face down. His expression didn't change. His voice didn't change. He just kept talking something about a project in Dunwoody, a client who kept changing the tile selection like nothing had happened. But his thumb moved to cover the corner of the phone where the screen had lit up. I didn't say anything. I picked up my coffee. I looked out at the magnolia tree. That's odd, I thought. And then because I loved this man, and because I had trained myself my whole professional life not to jump to conclusions without evidence, I let it go. I told myself, you do this at work. You find problems that aren't there. Don't bring that home. So I didn't. I smiled at my husband across our back porch on that April Sunday with the Atlanta morning coming alive around us, and I let it go. That was my first mistake. Not because I should have confronted him. Confrontation without evidence is just noise. My mistake was thinking it was a one-time thing. My mistake was not yet understanding that in my own home, with my own husband, I was already inside a crime scene. I just didn't know it yet. Diana Okafor had been my best friend since our sophomore year at Spelman, when we were assigned to the same study group for business law and spent more time arguing about case strategy than actually studying. She was now one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Atlanta, with an office on West Peachtree and a reputation that made opposing counsel nervous. We had lunch together every Friday, a ritual we'd kept for 15 years, through marriages and babies and career pivots and every hard thing life had thrown at us. That Sunday evening, after Marcus had gone to watch the game at Terrence's place, I found myself texting Diana. Hey, random question. Is it weird if your husband always keeps his phone face down?
Define always.
Like, always, always.
Simone, pay attention.
I stared at that message for a long time. Then I locked my phone, went upstairs, kissed my children's photos on the hallway wall, and went to bed. Pay attention, she said. I would, just not yet in the way either of us expected. Let me tell you about Savannah. Because I keep coming back to it, that trip we took last October, just 14 months before everything collapsed, and I think it deserves its moment before I bury it under everything that came after. Marcus surprised me with it. That was the thing. He planned the whole weekend himself, booked the inn on Jones Street, the one with the iron gate courtyard and the jasmine, climbing the fence, arranged for my mother to keep the kids, made a reservation at the old pink house for Saturday night. I remember standing in our bedroom doorway watching him pack his overnight bag and thinking, this is the man I married. This exact version. The one who paid attention, who noticed what I loved, who did things without being asked. We walked Forsyth Park in the October heat, his hand in mine, talking about nothing important. Amara's new obsession with fractions, whether Nolan's dinosaur phase would ever end, whether we should finally redo the master bathroom. We sat on a bench near the fountain.
You know what I love about us? We never run out of things to say.
I leaned my head on his shoulder. I believed him completely. I want you to hold on to that image, Marcus and me on that bench in Forsyth Park, the fountain behind us, the October light going golden through the live oaks, because I'm about to set it on fire. By the time we came home from Savannah, something had already changed. I just couldn't see it from the inside. November arrived cold and fast. Marcus started working later. Not dramatically later. 30 minutes here, an hour there, but consistently. He'd always kept irregular hours, construction being what it is, so at first it didn't register as unusual. But then I noticed the pattern beneath the pattern. He was never late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those 2 days he was home by 6 without fail. Every other day was unpredictable. Tuesdays and Thursdays. I filed it away. He also started criticizing my work in a way he never had before. It began subtly, a raised eyebrow when I mentioned staying late, a comment delivered lightly enough to seem like a joke, but with just enough edge to land.
Another late night saving corporate America, huh? Must be nice spending all day playing detective with somebody else's money.
I brushed it off the first few times. The 5th time at dinner on a Wednesday evening in mid-November, I said, Marcus, that's not really fair. He looked at me across the table. Amara was right there working on her spelling words. Nolan was pushing peas around his plate. Marcus set down his fork, leaned back in his chair and said, calm, almost bored.
You know what's not fair, coming home to an empty house every night because my wife would rather count somebody else's money than be here with her family. That's what's not fair, Simone.
Amara looked up from her spelling words. I felt heat rise up the back of my neck. I kept my voice even. The kids are right here.
I know where the kids are,
he said, and picked his fork back up like the conversation was over. Amara watched me. 7 years old, already reading rooms better than most adults. I gave her a small smile and asked about her spelling words, but I felt the weight of that moment sitting in my chest like a stone. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I tried to talk to him about it. He apologized, sort of.
I didn't mean it like that. I've just been stressed about the Dunwoody project. You know how I get?
I accepted it because I wanted to. Because the alternative, sitting with the discomfort of thinking my husband resented my career, was something I wasn't ready for. That was the second mistake. December brought the holidays, which papered over everything the way holidays do. My mother's house on Christmas Eve Terrence and his wife Candace coming over Christmas Day. The kids tearing through wrapping paper while Marcus filmed on his phone and laughed and seemed for a few days like himself again. I exhaled. I thought we just needed to get through the stress of the fall. We're fine. We're still us. Then came the Sauke, the credit card statement. First week of January. I always reviewed our joint statements myself. Old habit, professional instinct. I couldn't turn off the part of my brain that scanned for anomalies, even in my personal finances. Most months it was routine. This month on page 3, there was a charge from the Lowe's Atlanta Hotel. $312. Date November 14th. A Thursday. I sat at the kitchen island for a long time looking at that number. Thursday. Marcus had been home by 6 that Thursday. I remembered because Nolan had a slight fever and Marcus had actually picked him up from school, something he rarely did, and had dinner on the table when I got home at 6:15. I remembered thinking how sweet it was, how thoughtful. But the charge was time-stamped 2:47 p.m. I closed the statement. I opened it again. I looked at the charge for another full minute. Then I did what I always do when I find an anomaly at work. I didn't react. I made a note. I kept looking. That evening, I asked Marcus as casually as I could manufacture if he'd had to meet a client at a hotel recently. He was watching television, barely looked up.
Yeah, a couple months back. Client wanted to see material samples in a neutral space, didn't want me coming to his house. Why?
It was plausible. It was entirely plausible. Contractors do meet clients in hotel lobbies and conference rooms. I knew this, but there was a second charge. 4 days later, same hotel, $289, a Tuesday. I didn't mention the second charge. I just smiled and said, "Oh, nothing, just saw it on the statement." He nodded and went back to his show. The next Friday at lunch with Diana, I told her about the charges. She listened without interrupting. She always listened without interrupting. It was one of the things I loved most about her, and when I finished, she set down her fork and said,
Have you Googled Leah Simmons?
I froze. Who?
You mentioned that name 2 months ago. Marcus mentioned a new project partner named Leah.
I had mentioned it in passing, barely registered it at the time. Diana had filed it. Of course she had Diana filed everything. No, I said. I haven't.
Don't Google her yet. Not from your phone, not from your home computer. If there's something there you don't want a search history, use the computer at the library on your lunch break.
I stared at her. Diana, you're talking like this is a case. She looked at me with those courtroom eyes steady, unblinking, no mercy in them.
Simone, she said quietly. It might be.
I drove home that evening on I-85 with the Atlanta skyline going orange and purple in my rearview mirror, and I kept hearing Diana's voice. It might be. When I got home, Marcus was at the stove making the kids dinner. He turned when I walked in, gave me a full smile, warm, familiar, the smile I had loved for 13 years, and said,
Hey baby, rough day.
No, I said. Good day, actually. I set my bag down, kissed Nolan on the top of his head, helped Amara set the table. And for the first time in our marriage, I sat across from my husband at dinner and quietly, methodically, began building a case. I want to be precise about what happened next, because precision matters to me, it always has, and because the details are important, not just for the story, but because every single detail I'm about to tell you became evidence. The Tuesday after my lunch with Diana, I drove to the Carnegie Library branch on Margaret Mitchell Square during my lunch break. I used a public computer. I searched for Leah Simmons, Atlanta contractor. She came up immediately. Leah Simmons, 34 years old, owner of Simmons Design Build, LLC, a boutique residential construction and interior design firm based in Midtown Atlanta. Her website was clean professional project photos of renovated kitchens and open-plan living spaces, all staged beautifully. Her LinkedIn showed 7 years in the industry, previously a project manager at a larger firm before going independent 2 years ago. She was attractive. I registered that the way you register the temperature outside factually, without drama. I looked at her business registration date. Simmons Design Build LLC had been incorporated in Georgia 18 months ago, 2 months after Marcus started keeping his phone face down. I sat with that for a moment. Then I went back to work. Over the next 3 weeks, I did what I do. I followed the money, not aggressively, carefully, methodically, leaving no trace of my own. I reviewed every joint financial account we had, checking savings, the joint credit card, the home equity line. I went back 18 months and I read every line. What I found made the back of my neck go cold. 11 transfers from our joint business account, the account we used for household expenses, and which Marcus managed day to day to an entity called SDB Contracting Partners. Total amount over 18 months, $213,400. I searched SDB Contracting Partners in the Georgia Secretary of State database. Registered agent Leah A. Simmons. I sat at my home office desk at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, the house quiet, Marcus asleep down the hall, and I looked at that number for a long time. $213,000. Not hotel charges. Not dinner receipts. Not the ordinary sloppy evidence of an affair. This was something else entirely. This was structured. This was deliberate. This was a man who had spent 18 months systematically moving marital assets out of our joint finances and into the hands of the woman he was sleeping with through a paper trail thin enough to look like legitimate business transactions to anyone who wasn't looking closely. But I looked closely. It's literally my job. I opened a new folder on my personal laptop, the one Marcus didn't know the password to the one I kept in my office at work, and brought home in my bag. I titled the folder Documentation. I started with what I had. Every transfer, every date, every account number. Receipts I pulled from the joint account portal. The SDB Contracting Partners registration. The timestamps. Then I did something that took more discipline than anything I had done in my professional life. I closed the laptop, went to bed, and said nothing. Marcus was lying on his side when I got into bed. His breathing was slow, and even he was already asleep. I lay on my back in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and I thought, you don't move until you have everything. You know this. You've told clients this 100 times. You do not tip your hand before the case is airtight. So I didn't. 2 weeks later, I found the physical document. Marcus had a habit of leaving his work jacket draped over the chair in our bedroom. Drove me crazy. I'd asked him to hang it up 1,000 times. On a Thursday morning in late January, I was moving the jacket to hang it up myself, the way I always eventually did, and a folded piece of paper slipped out of the inside pocket and landed on the floor. I picked it up. It was a contract. Typed signed, dated 3 weeks prior. A subcontracting agreement between Carter and Associates Construction and Simmons Design Build, LLC, for a residential project in Vinings. Contract value $87,000. Payment terms lump sum upon project completion. I read it twice. Then I checked our joint business account. The $87,000 had already been transferred 11 days ago to Leah Simmons. I folded the contract back exactly as I had found it, put it in the jacket pocket, hung the jacket in the closet. Then I photographed every page with my work phone before I did any of that. That evening at dinner, the kids at the table, Amara telling us about a disagreement she'd had with her best friend at school. Nolan cutting his chicken into increasingly tiny pieces, the way he always did. I waited for a natural pause in the conversation, and I said casually, "Hey, I saw a contract in your jacket pocket this morning when I was hanging it up. The Vinings project, is that a new one?" Marcus looked up. Something moved behind his eyes, fast, almost imperceptible. If I hadn't been watching for it, I would have missed it.
Yeah. Subcontracting some of the finish work out. Easier that way.
To Simmons Design Build, I said. I didn't recognize the name. And that was when I saw it, the first full flash of the man he had become underneath the man I thought I knew. His jaw tightened. He set his fork down with a little more force than necessary. And he looked at me across the dinner table, across our children, across the meal I had cooked in the home I had helped pay for. And he said,
"You think because you can count money, you understand real work. You sit behind a desk all day, Simone. That's not a real job. That's just numbers on a screen."
The table went silent. Amara stopped talking mid-sentence. Nolan put down his fork. I felt the heat come up my neck again, the same heat from November, but this time something else came with it. Not hurt, not the old familiar flinch. Something quieter, something that watched him from a distance. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice completely level. "The kids."
"They're fine,"
he said, and picked his fork back up. But Amara was looking at him now with those sharp 7-year-old eyes, and I watched her look at me, and I watched her make a decision about what she was seeing. Children always know. They knew before I did. Later, when the kids were in bed and I came downstairs, Marcus was in the living room. He had his apologetic face on the renegotiation face. Before he could speak, I said, "I'm not doing this tonight," and went back upstairs. He followed me to the bedroom doorway.
"Simone, come on. You know I've been stressed about..."
"Good night, Marcus." He stood in the doorway for a moment.
"You're so sensitive. I said one thing and you're acting like I committed a crime."
I pulled the covers up. "Good night." He left. I lay in the dark and I thought about that phrase. Like I committed a crime. "Honey," I thought, "you did. You just don't know I can prove it yet. That night, I added the $87,000 Vinings contract to my documentation folder. The total now stood at $400 in documented transfers. I thought about Diana's voice. It might be a case. It wasn't might anymore. And the folder I had titled Documentation, I renamed it that night. I called it what it actually was, Operation 6 Minutes. February came in cold and mean, the way Atlanta Februarys sometimes do, not the dramatic cold of cities that know how to handle winter, but that damp, gray, seeping cold that gets into everything and won't let go. That's what the next 6 weeks felt like. Not a storm, just a slow, persistent chill that worked its way into every corner of my life. I had $400 documented. I had dates, account numbers, a paper trail that would make a federal auditor sit up straight. But I was not finished. And I knew I was not finished because I had been doing this work long enough to know that what you find first is never the whole picture. The first layer is always just the invitation to keep digging. So I kept digging. What I found on the 3rd week of February stopped me cold in a way the money hadn't. I had requested quietly through a contact at another firm who owed me a professional favor, a search of all Georgia LLC registrations linked to Marcus's business address, his personal cell, and his email domain. Standard procedure in a fraud investigation. The kind of search that takes 3 days and returns a spreadsheet that looks boring until it isn't. There were 2 additional entities I hadn't found before. Carter Legacy Holdings LLC. Registered 14 months ago. Registered agent Marcus D. Carter. Listed address a mailbox service in Dunwoody. And DCL Property Group. Registered 11 months ago. Registered agent Leah A. Simmons. Same Dunwoody mailbox address. I pulled the filings for both. Carter Legacy Holdings had received 4 wire transfers from Carter and Associates Construction over the past year, totaling $127,000 logged as consulting fees. DCL Property Group had received 3 transfers from Carter Legacy Holdings, totaling $98,000 logged as project development costs. The money was moving in a circle. From our marital business through a shell Marcus controlled into an entity Leah controlled. And from there, I didn't yet know where it went from there. But I would find out. Total documented transfers now $525,400, $500,000. I sat in my office on the 14th floor of Meridian Financial Consulting, looking out at the Atlanta skyline, and I let that number sit in my body for exactly 2 minutes. The way I let difficult numbers sit when I'm working a case, not avoiding them, just letting them become real before I move on. Then I picked up my phone and called Diana. 525, I said when she answered.
Say that again.
$525,000. 14 months. 3 entities. I heard her exhale slowly.
Simone, this isn't divorce fraud anymore. This is marital asset dissipation with intent. Possibly wire fraud. This is federal territory.
I know, I said.
How are you holding up?
I looked out at the skyline. I'm fine. I said, I'm building the case. What I didn't tell Diana, what I didn't tell anyone, was that I was not entirely fine. That I was sleeping 4 hours a night. That I was eating lunch at my desk because the thought of sitting still in a restaurant made me feel like I was crawling out of my skin. That I had started keeping the documentation folder backed up in 3 separate places. My work server, an encrypted external drive I kept in my desk drawer at the office, and a cloud account Marcus had no knowledge of, because somewhere around week 3, I had started to feel in the way animals feel things that Marcus was watching me watching him. And I was right. In the first week of March, Marcus suggested over dinner, pleasantly reasonably, that we should separate our finances. Consolidate his business accounts under Carter and Associates, exclusively move household expenses to a new joint account with a lower balance, and transfer our primary savings, $47,000, into what he called a higher yield account he had researched. He presented it like a gift, like he was doing me a favor.
It's just cleaner, he said. Less confusion. You know how these things get tangled?
I looked at him across the table. I smiled. Let me think about it, I said.
What's there to think about,
He said. The pleasantness dropped 1 degree. Just one.
It makes financial sense. Unless you have a reason not to want to do it.
I just like to think before I sign things. I said, occupational habit. He let it go that night. But I noticed in the days that followed that he brought it up twice more, once casually, once with a sharper edge.
I don't understand why you're making this complicated, Simone. It's our money. I'm trying to manage it better.
He was trying to move the $47,000 before the case was filed. I was certain of it. I stalled. I asked questions he couldn't easily answer. I said I wanted to consult with a financial advisor. Our financial advisor, I emphasized, before making any changes. He couldn't argue against that without showing his hand. But the stalling had a cost. Marcus began working on the perimeter of my life. He called his mother Loretta. And I know this because Loretta called me on a Wednesday evening in mid-March while I was helping Nolan with his bath. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Simone, Loretta said. In that voice, she had warm on the surface granite underneath. I'm going to say this because I love you like a daughter. Marcus tells me you've been difficult lately. About the finances. About working late. About not being present. I sat on the edge of the bathtub watching Nolan arrange his dinosaurs along the soap dish. Marcus said that he's worried about the marriage, she said. A man needs to feel like the head of his household baby. You know that. You've always known that. Don't let that job make you forget what's important. I kept my voice completely steady. Thank you, Loretta. I'll keep that in mind. I hung up. And I sat there for a moment with Nolan's rubber T-Rex in my hand. And I thought about what it meant that Marcus had called his mother before he'd finished the conversation with me. That he was already building a narrative. Already recruiting. 2 days later, I found out he'd told Terrence the same story, that I was checked out, that I cared more about work than family, that he was trying his best with a wife who wasn't there anymore. Terrence had pulled back from me in recent weeks, and now I understood why. Marcus had gotten there first. I was being surrounded. Quietly, methodically, the same way I was surrounding him. The difference was that I knew it. And he didn't know that I knew. That Friday lunch with Diana, I arrived first and ordered us both coffee. And when Diana sat down, she took one look at my face and said,
Talk to me.
So I did. I told her about Loretta, about Terrence, about the savings account request, about the 2 new entities. Diana listened to all of it. Then she folded her hands on the table and said,
He's isolating you and liquidating simultaneously. He's on a timeline, Simone. He's almost ready to file.
I know, I said.
Then we need to move faster than him.
Not yet, I said. I need one more thing.
Diana looked at me. What?
I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. Outside Peachtree Street was gray and wet lunch crowds moving fast under umbrellas. I need him to think he's already won, I said. I need him so confident, so sure of himself that when he walks into that courtroom, he's not even looking for the trap. Diana was quiet for a moment. Then slowly she smiled the courtroom smile, the one that meant she understood exactly what I was doing.
Then let's give him something to be confident about, she said.
I nodded. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the cold start to lift. Because the best hunters don't announce themselves. And I had just decided it was almost time to hunt. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with sirens or breaking glass or the dramatic collapse you see in movies. It arrives quietly on a Tuesday evening in late March at a networking event you almost didn't attend, wearing a name tag that reads Leah Simmons in clean black print. The Atlanta Construction and Design Industry Mixer was held at Ponce City Market 3rd floor, the event space, with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Beltline. I was there representing Meridian Financial Consulting, working the room the way I always did business cards, firm handshakes, the particular kind of professional warmth that opens doors. I had been to 100 events like this. I almost hadn't come to this one. I had a headache. Nolan had been fussy at dinner. Marcus had offered pleasantly to put the kids to bed so I could go, which I now understood meant he wanted me out of the house. I was standing near the windows with a glass of sparkling water when she approached me. She was attractive in the way her website photos suggested tall, natural hair pulled back, wearing a well-cut blazer, the color of deep burgundy. She had an easy smile and the kind of direct eye contact that comes from years of pitching clients. Her name tag said Leah Simmons Design Build LLC. She stuck out her hand. Leah Simmons. Love your blazer. Is that a local designer? And just like that, we were talking. She didn't know who I was. That was immediately clear. I was wearing my maiden name on my own name tag, Simone Adele, a professional habit I'd kept since before the marriage, and there was nothing in her manner that suggested recognition. She was warm, genuine, the kind of person you'd enjoy meeting under any other circumstances. We talked for 20 minutes. About the industry, about Atlanta's construction boom, about the challenges of running a small firm against larger competitors. She mentioned a few ongoing projects, a Vinings renovation, some work in Sandy Springs. I listened to every word and kept my face open and interested and gave away absolutely nothing. And then near the end of our conversation, she said it. I've actually been really fortunate lately. I have a great partnership going with a contractor we've been working really closely together for almost 2 years now. It's made a huge difference for the business. The way she said closely. The slight softening around that word, the almost imperceptible shift in her eyes, the look of someone who is editing herself in real time. That's wonderful, I said. What's his firm? She hesitated just half a second. Carter and Associates, do you know them? I don't think so, I said, but I'll keep the name in mind. I shook her hand again. I smiled. I excused myself to refresh my sparkling water. I stood at the bar for 3 minutes with my back to the room looking at the rows of bottles behind the counter, and I breathed. Just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my therapist had taught me years ago for high-pressure depositions. Then I picked up my water, turned around, and finished working the room. I drove home on I-85 in silence, no music, no podcast, nothing. Just the highway and the lights and the city moving past me in the dark. By the time I pulled into our driveway on Wyndham Court, I had made a decision. Marcus was in the living room when I came in. The kids were already in bed. He looked up from his phone face down until he heard my key in the lock, then quickly flipped and gave me that smile.
How was it?
Good, I said. Met some interesting people. I set my bag down. Went to the kitchen. Poured a glass of water. Came back. Marcus, I said, sitting down across from him. Who is Leah Simmons? The smile didn't disappear. That was the thing a guilty man with less control would have flinched. Marcus was better than that. The smile just became slightly more deliberate, the way a person holds a door open when they're actually thinking about closing it.
I told you. Subcontractor. Design partner on a few projects.
She said you've been working closely together for almost 2 years.
We have. Good working relationship, why...
I met her tonight, I said. At the mixer. A pause. Shorter than a heartbeat.
Small world.
She seems nice, I said.
She's professional. Good at what she does.
I nodded slowly. Let the silence sit for a moment. Then, Marcus, are you having an affair? He looked at me, and I want you to understand, I want you to really picture this. He looked at me with something close to offense. Genuine seeming offense. The kind that makes you doubt your own eyes.
Are you serious right now?
I'm asking a direct question.
No,
he said. Flat, firm, no hesitation.
I'm not having an affair. Leah is a business partner. The fact that you went to one event and talked to her for 5 minutes, and now you're sitting here accusing me...
He shook his head.
Nobody's going to believe the word of a woman who can't even keep her own husband happy, Simone.
The room went very quiet. I looked at him for a long moment. What did you just say?
You heard me,
he said, and stood up.
I'm going to bed.
He walked past me and up the stairs. I heard the bedroom door close. I sat alone in our living room in the house we had chosen together under the ceiling fan Marcus had installed himself the first summer we moved in, and I let the words land. Nobody's going to believe the word of a woman who can't even keep her own husband happy. I want you to understand something about that moment. Because people always ask, why didn't you leave then? Why didn't you confront him harder? Why didn't you fall apart? Here is why. Because I had already found the $525,400. I had already built the documentation folder. I had already started Operation 6 Minutes. I had known with professional certainty for 3 months, 3 full months, that Marcus was systematically looting our marital finances and funneling them through Leah Simmons's entities. I had known before Savannah, before the hotel charges, before the shell companies. I had known since December, and I had said nothing. Not because I was in denial, not because I was weak, not because I was still hoping it wasn't true, but because I had spent 11 years watching people destroy fraud cases by moving too soon, by tipping their hand before the net was fully closed, by letting emotion drive timing. I was not going to make that mistake. So when Marcus said, "Nobody's going to believe you," sitting in our living room at 11:15 on a Tuesday night in late March, what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that I had been letting him run for 3 months specifically, so that by the time I closed the net, there would be nowhere left to run to. I opened my laptop. I added the evening's events to the documentation folder, date, time, exact words, spoken my verbal response, his verbal response, logged it like a deposition. Then I opened a second document, and I began to build the trap. It would take the form of a set of financial records, real records, pulled from legitimate sources, formatted exactly as Marcus would expect them to look. Records that appeared to show irregularities in my own accounts. Records that a man convinced of his own superiority, a man who had just told his wife she wasn't smart enough to be believed, would not be able to resist using. I called it the honeypot file. I embedded metadata into every document in visible timestamps, access logs, digital fingerprints. If anyone opened those files and modified them, I would know exactly when, from exactly where, with exactly what device. Then I placed the folder in a location Marcus could find it. Our shared home network drive nested inside a folder labeled Tax Documents 2022, a folder he had accessed before a folder he knew existed, a folder he would feel entitled to. Then I waited. I was not the prey. I had never been the prey. I was the forensic accountant who had just set the most elegant trap of her 11-year career. And the man who thought I wasn't smart enough to be believed had just walked straight toward it. The night I placed the honeypot file on the shared network drive, I slept 7 hours straight for the first time in 2 months. Not because everything was fine, but because I had stopped waiting for something to happen and started making something happen. There is a difference between those two states that I cannot fully explain, except to say that one of them will hollow you out and the other one will fill you back up. April arrived. The magnolia in the backyard bloomed again, the same tree, the same white flowers, the same sweet smell coming through the kitchen window in the mornings. A year ago, I had stood at that window with my coffee and felt grateful. This April, I stood at the same window and felt something different. Not grief exactly, more like clarity. The kind that comes after you've stopped lying to yourself about what you're looking at. Marcus had not yet accessed the honeypot file. I checked the access logs every morning from my work laptop, a 30-second ritual as automatic as checking the weather. Nothing. 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 I was patient. I had been patient for months. I could be patient a little longer. What I could not control was what Marcus was doing in the meantime. On the second Thursday of April, I got a call from my Aunt Renee, my mother's older sister who lived in Decatur, and who I loved deeply, and who had never in her life called me to discuss my marriage. She called at 7:40 in the evening while I was helping Amara practice her multiplication tables. "Baby," she said, in the voice people use when they've been asked to deliver a message they don't fully believe in. "I just want you to know that I support you no matter what. But Loretta called me last week. And she said some things." I set down the multiplication flashcards. "What things?" "She said you've been neglecting your home. That you work so much the children barely see you. That Marcus has been carrying the family while you chase your career." A pause. "Simone, I told her that wasn't the woman I knew, but I wanted you to hear it from me." I stared at the wall above Amara's desk. "Thank you, Renee." "That's not what's happening." "I know, baby," she said. "I know." After we hung up, I sat for a moment in Amara's doorway. My daughter was bent over her flashcards pencil, moving completely focused. 7 years old and already so serious about getting things right. I thought about Loretta calling my aunt. I thought about Marcus telling Terrence I was checked out. I thought about the careful, patient construction of a narrative, the same careful patience I had been applying to my own case, but aimed in the opposite direction, at my reputation, at my credibility, at the story people would believe when the divorce filing arrived. He was good. I had to give him that. He was not good enough. The following Saturday evening, Terrence came for dinner. He'd been distant for weeks, shorter texts, declined invitations, and when Marcus had extended this particular invitation, something in Terrence's manner had shifted back toward me in a way I couldn't yet read. He arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and a six-pack for Marcus. And for the first hour, everything was surface, the kids' sports a renovation project Terrence was having done on his own house. Then Marcus, over his third beer, said something that changed everything. He was talking about a guy from his old neighborhood who had just gone through a divorce, shaking his head, making sympathetic sounds. And then with that particular casualness that isn't casual at all, he looked across the table at me and said,
You're not as smart as you think you are, Simone. You never were. You just learned how to dress it up.
He said it with a half smile, like it was a joke, like I should laugh. The table went absolutely still. Nolan had his fork halfway to his mouth. Amara put her fork down completely. She looked at her father. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at her father again with an expression that no 7-year-old should have to wear, measuring wary, trying to understand what kind of man was sitting across from her. I felt something move through me that I cannot fully name. Not anger. I had moved past the kind of anger that burns. This was colder. This was the particular cold that comes when you understand completely and without any remaining doubt exactly what someone is. I looked at Marcus. I smiled. Okay, I said, and turned to Nolan. Baby, eat your chicken. But Terrence had gone very still. I didn't look at him. I kept the dinner moving, asked about Amara's school project, refilled water glasses, kept my voice warm and even and utterly normal. But in my peripheral vision, I could see Terrence watching his brother with an expression I recognized from the courtroom faces Diana had described to me. The face of a witness who has just heard something they cannot unhear. After dinner, Marcus took the kids upstairs for bath time. Terrence and I stood in the kitchen. I was rinsing plates, and he was quiet for a long moment. And then he said very quietly,
How long has he been talking to you like that?
I kept rinsing. A while.
Simone,
Terrence.
I need to tell you something. About my brother.
I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, turned to look at him. What Terrence told me in the next 8 minutes standing in my kitchen while Marcus gave our children their baths upstairs was that Marcus had hired a private investigator 2 months ago, that the investigator had been tasked with finding evidence of financial misconduct on my part, or evidence of an affair, or anything that could be used to establish grounds for a favorable divorce settlement. That Marcus had told Terrence this himself, framing it as protecting himself from a wife who would take everything. That Terrence had stayed quiet because Marcus was his brother. But that what he had just watched at this dinner table, the way Marcus had spoken to me in front of my children, in front of Amara's 7-year-old face, had been the last thing.
I'm not going to lie for him. Not anymore.
I looked at my brother-in-law for a long moment. Terrence, do you understand what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm doing the right thing. About 4 months late, but still.
I nodded. Okay. 2 days later, I called Diana. I told her about Terrence, about the private investigator, about the dinner table moment with Amara. Diana was quiet for a moment.
The PI changes the timeline. If he's building a case against you, he may file sooner than we thought. We need to move.
One more thing, I said. I need the honeypot file to be accessed before we file. I need him to walk into that courtroom holding his own trap.
How long?
2 weeks, I said. Maybe 3.
Simone.
2 weeks, Diana.
She exhaled. Okay, 2 weeks. But I'm filing the fraud complaint the same day we file the divorce petition. Both at once. We don't give him a single hour of warning.
Agreed, I said. I hung up and sat in my office on the 14th floor and looked out at Atlanta, spreading away in every direction, glittering and enormous and indifferent. And I thought about Amara putting down her fork, about Terrence's face, about Marcus saying you're not as smart as you think you are in front of my children at my own dinner table. Something inside me went very quiet then. Not sad quiet, not scared quiet, the kind of quiet that comes just before you move. Dangerous quiet. On a Monday morning in the third week of April at 6:47 a.m., the access log on the honeypot file updated. I was sitting at my kitchen island with my first cup of coffee still in my robe, kids not yet awake Marcus in the shower upstairs. I had checked the log the way I checked it every morning automatically without expectation, the way you check the weather in a city where it almost never rains. And there it was. Access timestamp 6:44 a.m. Device Marcus D. Carter's personal laptop. Duration 14 minutes. File modifications confirmed. I set my coffee cup down very carefully on the counter. 14 minutes. He had been in those files for 14 minutes. Long enough to read them. Long enough to understand what he thought he was looking at. Long enough to start making copies, start building what he believed would be his case against me. I sat there in my kitchen with the Atlanta morning coming up gray and soft outside the window, and I felt something I had not felt in 6 months. Not relief, not yet. Something more precise than relief. The particular satisfaction of a mechanism engaging exactly as designed. The click of a lock turning. I picked my coffee back up. Took a slow sip. Upstairs, I heard the shower turn off. I heard Marcus moving around in our bedroom. I heard the closet open and close. I heard his footsteps in the hallway then on the stairs, and I was rinsing my coffee cup at the sink when he came into the kitchen. He was dressed for a site visit, work boots, Carhartt jacket, the Navy Carter and Associates cap he wore backward when he was in a good mood. He was in a very good mood.
Morning.
He said, opening the refrigerator. Morning, I said. He poured himself orange juice, checked his phone, set it face down on the counter. The old habit. I watched him in my peripheral vision and I thought he thinks he just found the winning card. He thinks the game is over. Big day, I asked.
We've got a site walk in Vinings this morning. Might be late tonight.
Okay, I said. I'll handle the kids. He looked at me then, a look I had become expert at reading over 13 years. This one had something new in it. A particular quality of satisfaction carefully concealed, but not concealed well enough. The look of a man who believes he is several moves ahead.
You seem good this morning.
He said. I am good, I said. He nodded, finished his juice, grabbed his keys. At the kitchen doorway, he paused and turned back. And because he was feeling powerful, because he had just spent 14 minutes in a file he believed would destroy me, he said,
You know, Simone, by the time I'm done, you won't have a penny, you won't have the kids, and you won't have that precious reputation of yours either.
He said it pleasantly, like a man commenting on the weather, like a man who had already written the ending and was simply reading it aloud. I looked at him from across our kitchen, the kitchen I had saved for 2 years to renovate with the marble countertops I had chosen and the copper fixtures I had installed myself, and I smiled at him, warm, easy, unbothered. Have a good day, Marcus, I said. He held my gaze for one more second. Then he left. I heard the front door close. I heard his truck back out of the driveway. I stood at the kitchen window and watched his taillights disappear down Wyndham Court. Then I picked up my phone and called Diana.
She answered on the first ring. Tell me.
He accessed it this morning, I said. 6:44. 14 minutes. Modifications confirmed. A beat of silence.
Today. We file today.
Today, I agreed. By 9:15 that morning, Diana had filed 2 simultaneous petitions with the Fulton County Superior Court, a divorce petition on grounds of marital misconduct, and a civil fraud complaint documenting $525,400 in marital asset dissipation across 3 entities, Carter and Associates Construction, Carter Legacy Holdings LLC, and DCL Property Group. Attached to the fraud complaint was a forensic financial analysis, 87 pages prepared by me, cross-referenced and footnoted with the precision of a federal audit. Also attached the honeypot file access log, timestamp, device ID, IP address, 14 minutes of modification history, clean and irrefutable, showing that Marcus Darnell Carter had accessed, altered, and prepared to present falsified financial documents I had created specifically for this purpose without authorization. The court issued an immediate asset freeze on all three entities pending investigation. Marcus found out at 11:40 a.m. I know the exact time because that's when my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail. He called 4 more times in the next 20 minutes. I let all of them go. His attorney called Diana at 12:15. Diana took the call, listened for approximately 90 seconds, and said,
Your client accessed and modified financial documents this morning that were not his to access or modify. The metadata is already filed with the court. I'd suggest he stop calling my client and start calling a criminal defense attorney.
Then she hung up. I was in a client meeting when Diana texted me. He knows. Asset freeze confirmed. His attorney is panicking. See you Thursday. I read the text under the conference table. I typed back one word. Good. Then I put my phone away and returned my full attention to the meeting. That evening, I made the kids' favorite dinner-baked mac and cheese, the real kind with the breadcrumb topped the recipe my mother had given me when I got married. Amara set the table without being asked. Nolan arranged his dinosaurs in a line along the kitchen windowsill, narrating a battle only he could see. The three of us ate together with music playing softly in the background, an old Anita Baker album my mother always had on when I was growing up. Marcus did not come home that night. After the kids were in bed, I sat on the back porch in the April dark, the magnolia tree, a pale shape against the night sky, and I allowed myself for the first time in 6 months to feel the full weight of everything. Not the anger, not the satisfaction, not the strategic calculus, just the grief of it. The clean, honest grief of a woman who had loved a man for 13 years and was now sitting alone on the porch they used to share on Sunday mornings. I let myself feel it completely, for about 20 minutes. Then I went inside, washed the dishes, checked on the kids, made sure all the doors were locked, and I opened my laptop one more time, not to work, not to check logs or review documents, but to write in the notes application I'd been keeping since January, a single line. Thursday, Courtroom 4B, Fulton County Superior Court, 9 a.m., 6 minutes. That's all it's going to take. I closed the laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and for the first time in 6 months, I slept the whole night through. Courtroom 4, B. Fulton County Superior Court, downtown Atlanta, Thursday morning, 8:55 a.m. The room was smaller than people imagine when they think about courtrooms. No grand columns, no soaring ceilings, just fluorescent light and wood paneling, and the particular smell of institutional carpet and old paper that every courthouse I have ever entered seems to share. 2 tables facing the bench. A gallery of maybe 15 seats, half of them occupied. Terrence sat in the second row, hands folded, looking straight ahead. Diana sat to my left, a yellow legal pad in front of her pen, uncapped, completely still in the way that very dangerous people are sometimes completely still. I wore my Navy Theory blazer, the good one, the one I wore when I needed to feel like exactly who I was. Marcus came in at 8:58 with his attorney, a man named Gerald Pitts, who had a reputation for aggressive divorce litigation and who was this morning already sweating lightly through his collar. Marcus was dressed well, charcoal suit, fresh cut, the full presentation of a man who believed he was about to win something. He set a thick manila folder on his table with the deliberate weight of someone laying down a winning hand. He did not look at me when he sat down. That told me everything. A man who is about to lose does not look at the person he thinks he's already beaten. He saves the look for the moment of victory. He was saving it. Judge Patricia Holloway entered at 9:02, 61 years old, 22 years on the bench, silver locks, pinned back reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She had the unhurried authority of someone who had seen every variation of human foolishness a courtroom could produce, and was no longer capable of being surprised by any of it.
We're here on the matter of Carter versus Carter.
she said, settling her glasses on her nose and opening her file.
Divorce petition and concurrent civil fraud complaint. Mr. Pitts, I understand your client has requested to present documentary evidence before we address the fraud complaint. I'll allow it. Make it brief.
Gerald Pitts stood, buttoned his jacket, nodded to Marcus, who slid the manila folder across the table. And here it was. The moment Marcus had been building toward for 18 months. The moment he had gotten up at 6:44 in the morning 3 days ago to prepare for. He thought this was his 6 minutes. Pitts cleared his throat. Your Honor, the respondent submits financial documentation indicating that the petitioner, Ms. Carter, has engaged in systematic misrepresentation of marital assets, including the concealment of income and unauthorized transfers from joint accounts over a period of year.
Your Honor.
Diana's voice. Calm, precise, surgical.
Judge Holloway looked over her glasses. Ms. Okafor.
Before the court accepts that documentation,
Diana said, rising smoothly,
the petitioner requests that the court's forensic technology specialist examine the metadata of the submitted files, specifically the access timestamps, modification history, and device identification data embedded in each document.
Pitts blinked. Your Honor, this is highly irregular.
It's a standard evidentiary verification request, Counselor.
Diana said pleasantly,
unless there's a reason the respondent objects to having his documents verified.
The room went very quiet. I did not look at Marcus. I looked at Judge Holloway. She studied Diana for a moment over her glasses. Then she looked at Pitts.
The court's technology analyst will examine the submitted documents. We'll recess for 20 minutes.
I sat with my hands folded on the table and breathed slowly and evenly and did not turn around. 22 minutes later, not 2022, the court's technology analyst, a young woman named Dr. Priya Mehta, returned and handed Judge Holloway a single page. The judge read it. Her expression did not change in any way that a casual observer would notice. But I had been watching judges for 11 years, and I saw the almost imperceptible stillness that came over her face, the stillness of someone confirming what they already suspected. She set the page down.
Mr. Carter, please stand.
Marcus stood. He was still composed, still certain. He had not yet understood.
The metadata analysis of the documents you submitted to this court indicates that these files were accessed from your personal device, a Dell laptop registered to Marcus D. Carter at 6:44 a.m. on Monday, April 21st. They were modified during a 14-minute session. The original unmodified versions of these same documents with intact metadata were filed by the petitioner's counsel 3 days ago as part of the fraud complaint.
She paused. Let that sit.
In other words, Mr. Carter, you submitted to this court documents that you altered after accessing them without authorization from your wife's personal records. And the petitioner, anticipating this exact sequence of events, had already filed the originals.
And that was the moment. The color drained from Marcus Carter's face so completely and so fast that it was like watching someone pull a plug. Not gradually all at once like a light switching off. His skin went gray undertoned ashen, the particular pallor of a man whose body has just understood something his mind is still refusing to process. His hands, the hands that had slammed on our kitchen table, the hands that had pointed at me across dinner and told me I wasn't smart enough, those hands began to shake. The folder in front of him, the thick, beautiful folder he had carried in like a trophy, slipped sideways. Papers slid out across the table. Some fell to the floor of the courtroom. Nobody moved to help him pick them up. Not Gerald Pitts. Not anyone. He grabbed the edge of the table. His knees had buckled. I watched him lock them, watched the effort it took, watched his whole body become an act of will just to remain standing. The voice that had told me I was nothing, that nobody would believe me, that I would end up with nothing, that voice, when it came, was barely recognizable. Cracked through the middle, thin and high, and stripped of every layer of authority it had ever carried.
That's not those documents, or...
Mr. Carter,
Judge Holloway said in the tone of a woman who has no remaining patience.
I would strongly advise you to stop speaking.
Pitts grabbed Marcus's arm, leaned in, whispered something urgent. In the second row, I heard a chair scrape. I turned just slightly and saw Leah Simmons, who had been subpoenaed as a material witness, stand up from her seat. She was looking at Marcus with an expression I recognized, not grief, not shock, but the cold, dawning understanding of a person who has just realized they were a tool, not a partner. That her name on those LLCs, her signature on those transfers, her entire partnership with Marcus had been constructed not out of love or even mutual benefit, but out of a man's need for a vessel to pour stolen money into. She picked up her bag, caught the eye of her own attorney at the back of the room, and walked out. She did not look at Marcus once. Diana stood, smoothed her jacket. And in the voice she used when she was about to close an argument permanently, she said,
Your Honor, the petitioner would like to note for the record that the respondent stated to my client in front of their minor children, and I quote, "You're not as smart as you think you are, Simone. You never were." The documented financial analysis she prepared, 847 pages cross-referenced to federal accounting standards, was prepared entirely by my client in her own time using her professional expertise. We would submit that the record speaks for itself regarding her intelligence.
Judge Holloway looked down at her file for a moment. Then she looked at Marcus over her glasses.
Sir, you stated your wife sits behind a desk and wouldn't understand real work,
she said.
The work she did documenting $525,000 in marital asset fraud across 3 shell entities suggests otherwise.
She removed her glasses.
The court finds sufficient cause to refer this matter to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Asset freeze remains in effect. Temporary custody of the minor children is granted to the petitioner pending full hearing. Mr. Carter, you are to vacate the marital residence within 48 hours.
The gavel came down. Marcus turned to me, then finally the look he had been saving. Except it was not the look he had planned. His eyes were wet. His jaw was working. He looked diminished in a way I had never seen him look, like something structural had gone out of him, like he had been holding himself up for months on the belief that he was winning, and without that belief, there was nothing left to hold him.
Simone, he said, please, I'll fix it. I'll give it all back. Just please don't do this.
I stood, picked up my bag, looked at him for one long, clear, unhurried moment. You're not sorry, Marcus, I said. You're just sorry the plan didn't work. I turned and walked toward the courtroom doors. Behind me, I heard Diana say quietly to no one in particular, or perhaps to everyone,
Nobody's going to believe the word of a woman who can't even keep her own husband happy. Your Honor, the record will reflect that quite a few people believed her today.
I pushed open the courtroom doors. The Atlanta morning hit me full in the face, warm, bright, the city loud and alive and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened in courtroom 4B. I stopped on the courthouse steps, tipped my face up toward the sun, and I breathed. For the first time in 6 months, maybe longer. I breathed like a woman who had nothing left to hide from and nothing left to fear. 6 minutes. That's all it had taken. 3 months after the hearing in courtroom 4B, I repainted the back porch. Not because it needed it, the paint was fine, still holding up well against the Atlanta humidity, but because I wanted to. Because I stood out there one Saturday morning in late July with my coffee, the magnolia tree, full and green and heavy with summer, and I thought, this space is mine now. Let it look the way I want it to look. So I went to the hardware store on Cascade Road, the same street I grew up on, bought 2 gallons of a deep, warm terracotta I had been thinking about for years, and I spent the afternoon painting while Amara helped, and Nolan provided commentary, and the 3 of us had the kind of Saturday that I had almost forgotten was possible. That's where I want to start this last part of the story. Not with the legal outcomes, though, I'll get to those. Not with the vindication, though, that matters too. But with a Saturday afternoon and terracotta paint and my daughter's handprint accidentally on the porch railing and Nolan's dinosaur commentary and the particular quality of late July light in Atlanta when the sky goes that impossible shade of gold and everything smells like cut grass and possibility. That's what I fought for. Not the house, not the money. That afternoon. Now let me tell you what happened after the courthouse steps. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office opened a formal investigation into Marcus's financial activities within 3 weeks of Judge Holloway's referral. The asset freeze remained in place across all three entities, Carter and Associates Carter, Legacy Holdings, and DCL Property Group. A forensic accounting firm, not mine, an independent one appointed by the court, spent 6 weeks reviewing the records and confirmed every figure in my 87-page analysis. Every transfer, every shell entity, every timestamp. The total when the independent analysis was complete came to $538,200, $13,000 more than I had documented from 2 transfers I hadn't yet found. Marcus's contracting license was suspended pending the criminal investigation. Carter and Associates Construction, which he had built from nothing with a pickup truck and a business license, effectively ceased operations. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in College Park. I know because Terrence told me not as gossip, but as information, the kind you share when you're trying to make sure someone stays safe. Marcus had been calling Terrence daily at first, then weekly, then less. The calls, Terrence said, were always the same, a rotation of self-pity, blame, and the particular bitterness of a man who had been certain of his own intelligence and had been proven publicly and permanently wrong. Leah Simmons cooperated fully with the DA's investigation in exchange for reduced civil liability. Her attorney negotiated her out of criminal exposure by demonstrating accurately that she had not fully understood the nature of the transfers moving through her entities. Marcus had told her it was legitimate tax structuring. She had believed him. I don't know what to do with that, honestly. She was not innocent. You don't sign your name to $500,000 in transactions without asking hard questions. But she was also used. And in the end, she told the truth, which is more than Marcus ever managed. The divorce was finalized in September. The settlement, given the fraud findings, was straightforward. I retained the house on Wyndham Court primary custody of Amara and Nolan, and the full balance of our joint savings. Marcus retained his personal vehicle, his personal accounts, what remained in them after the asset freeze proceedings, and a court-ordered repayment schedule that his attorney described in a filing I later read as substantially burdensome. I did not feel sorry about that. Terrence came to dinner the week after the divorce was finalized. He brought flowers, sunflowers, which he somehow knew were my favorite, and he sat at my kitchen table and he said,
Simone, I am sorry I didn't say something sooner. I was loyal to the wrong thing for too long.
I put the sunflowers in the blue vase on the counter. You said something when it mattered, I told him. That's what counts. He nodded. He stayed for 3 hours. He and Amara played 2 full rounds of her favorite board game, and he lost both times genuinely because my daughter does not permit mercy at the board game table. She gets that from me. Nolan fell asleep on the couch next to him watching a dinosaur documentary. When Terrence left, he hugged me at the door and said,
You're the steadiest thing that ever happened to this family, Simone. You always were.
I thought about his toast at our wedding. Don't ever let him forget that. Marcus had forgotten. But I hadn't. Diana and I had our Friday lunch the week after everything was finalized. We went to South City Kitchen, our old spot, the one Marcus and I used to go to for date nights, and I had avoided it for a year without consciously realizing I was avoiding it. We ordered the shrimp and grits and the sweet tea, and we sat in the window, and the Atlanta noon came through the glass warm and bright, and Diana raised her glass and said,
To forensic accountants who don't tip their hand.
I laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded. I hadn't heard that sound from myself in a long time. To lawyers who tell their best friends to pay attention, I said. We clinked glasses. I want to tell you about a morning in October just a few weeks ago as I'm telling you this story. I was driving Amara to school early, the Atlanta sky still pink at the edges, the city not yet fully awake. She was in the back seat with her backpack on her lap, working through something in her head. I could tell by the way she was looking out the window, that particular focused look she gets. Then she said, without turning from the window, Mama, you knew the whole time, didn't you, about Daddy? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. 8 years old now, sharp as a tack as she had always been. For a while, I said carefully, Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Why didn't you just say something right away? I thought about how to answer that honestly in a way an 8-year-old could hold. Because saying something before you're ready just gives the other person a chance to prepare, I said. When you know something is wrong, the most powerful thing you can do is make sure you're ready before you move. Does that make sense? She considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. Then she nodded. Like in chess? She said, "You don't move until you see the whole board." Exactly like that, I said. She turned back to the window. A few seconds passed. "You saw the whole board," she said. Not a question. "I did," I said. She nodded once satisfied and didn't bring it up again. I sat with that conversation for the rest of the day. And I'm sitting with it still. Because I think that 8-year-old girl my daughter watching the Atlanta morning go past her window understood something that took me years and a broken marriage and 6 months of silence to learn. That knowing is not the same as being ready. That patience is not the same as weakness. That the most devastating thing a woman can do to someone who underestimates her is exactly nothing until the moment she does everything. I started writing a book in November. It's not a memoir or not only a memoir. It's a practical guide for women navigating financial infidelity in marriage. What to document, how to document it, what your rights are, how to protect yourself before you're ready to move. My editor at the Atlanta publishing house calls it the book every woman should read before she needs it. It comes out next spring. I am still a forensic accountant at Meridian Financial Consulting. I was promoted to Director of Investigations in August, the promotion Marcus had been trying to get ahead of when he started moving money. The $43,000 salary increase. The stock options. All of it. He timed it perfectly, actually, just not the way he planned. My name is Simone Carter. I am 38 years old. I am a forensic accountant, a director, a mother of 2 children who are going to know their whole lives that their mother did not flinch. I am a woman who was told she wasn't smart enough to be believed by a man who then handed me the evidence to destroy him and called it his master plan. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become after it. And if you are sitting somewhere right now in your car, in your kitchen, in your bed at midnight, with your headphones in and a feeling in your chest that you can't quite name, but that feels like the beginning of something you're not ready to face, I want you to hear me. You don't have to move today. You don't have to have the whole plan today. You just have to start paying attention. Start documenting. Start trusting the part of you that already knows. Because that part of you, it has never been wrong. And when you're ready, when the board is set and the case is built and the time is exactly right, 6 minutes is all you're going to need. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, drop it in the comments. Tell me what hit hardest. Tell me if you've been there. Tell me what you would have done. Your voice matters in this space. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Every week, I bring you stories about women who refuse to stay down. You don't want to miss what's coming next.